Hello everyone. Do you know what's common between a Tesla, an Audi e-tron, a Porsche Taycan, a BMW i5, or any other electric car for that matter? I was actually hoping for a response, but anyways, you can get these cars at up to 50% discount if you buy a brand new electric car primarily for business use and are operating under a company structure in UK, or even if not under a company structure, are self-employed or a sole proprietor, and again using the car primarily for business purposes. The different tax credit that the UK government allows you to claim means you can buy these cars at roughly 50% of the price. A huge advantage, and what a great way of helping the environment, drive sustainably and drive at a much lower price. Now, how much tax you end up claiming back is based on your individual circumstances, your VAT registration status, your income, the price of the car. But don't worry about it. We will simply deconstruct all of this in this video using simple and practical examples, which will clear up everything for you. And I'm also going to leave a calculator in the description, which you can download and understand this more, and maybe even change a few figures and understand that in your case, how much of the tax back you might be entitled to. But before doing that, please do subscribe to my channel. Now, before we dig into the numbers, the first and the foremost thing, which is important to understand, is the ownership of the car. Now, we need to make sure that if you're operating under a company structure, the car belongs to the company. What the word belong here means is the ownership has transferred from the dealership to you. If you bought it on cash, naturally, the car has now belonging to the company. If you were to bought it on hire purchase, it probably also, very likely, the ownership has moved over. But if you're operating under a contract lease, in some cases, the ownership doesn't move over. So you better check with your dealership whether the ownership of the car belongs to you or not. Now, as long as that's clear, we'll cross the next bridge. Now, let's assume a scenario where you're operating under a company structure and your income or your turnover is 100,000. You're not VAT registered, which means 100,000 of income minus 20,000 of expenses. That's 80,000 of profit in total. Now, on an 80,000 pound profit in total, you're going to end up paying 17,000 pounds in corporation tax, which means you're going to be left with 63,000 pounds to take back home. Under 63,000 pounds of income, I'm assuming you're going to withdraw that in the most tax efficient way, which means you're going to take 12,500 roughly of that as salary and don't pay any tax on it, and the remaining 50,000 as dividends, which means you're going to end up paying 7,300 pounds in dividend taxes. Now, the 17,000 pounds of corporation tax and 7,300 pounds of dividend tax means you ended up paying total taxes of 24,300. Let's assume you bought the car worth 50,000 pounds, which is brand new electric and qualifies for the first year 100% allowed. What that means is your expenses of 20,000 have now jumped to 70,000. And against 100,000 of income, you only made a 30,000 pound profit. 100 minus 70 is 30. On a 30,000 pound of corporate tax or corporate profit, you're going to end up paying a corporate tax of only 5,700. After paying the 5,700 pound in tax, 30 minus 5,700, you're going to end up taking 24,300 pound home in your income. Assuming again you're going to withdraw that in the most tax efficient way, you're probably going to take 12,000 of that as salary and the remaining 12 as dividend, which means you're going to end up paying 2,000 pounds in taxes. Now, in this scenario where you bought the car, you've ended up paying total taxes of 7,700, 5,700 as corporate, and 2,000 pounds as a dividend tax. Had you not bought the car, you paid 24,300 pounds in taxes. Minus the 7,700 gives you 17,000 pounds of tax credit. That means you've paid less 17,000 pounds in tax just because you've bought the car. Now, there is something called the benefit in kind, which sounds more scary than it actually is. Benefit in kind, the government assumes that there will be some incidental use of the car, which will be for personal reasons. So it allows a certain percentage of the car to be taxed on that basis. Now, that percentage is far higher for any petrol, hybrid, or diesel cars, but very low or almost negligible for electric cars. It was actually 0% a couple of years ago, but now it stands at 2%. It will probably rise to 3% in the next 3 years or so. But what does 2% equate to? I'm not going to go into too much detail, but 2% equates to, based on your circumstances, if you're a 20% taxpayer, 40% or 45%, it might be different, but it equates to anywhere between 400 to 600 pounds in tax a year. Now, you've actually ended up saving 17,000 pounds, and against which you paid a benefit in kind tax of about, let's say, 500, 600 pounds. Still end up saving 16,500 pounds in taxes. Now, all of this is with the assumption that you're not VAT registered. If you are VAT registered, the 50,000 list price of the car is already inclusive of VAT. which is 8,200. So 42,000 plus 8,000 is what gives you 50,000. You're entitled to claim that 8,000 of VAT back in addition to the tax back or the tax credit of 17,000. Now the 17,000 will reduce slightly to maybe about 15.5, 16. That's because you're not claiming the 50,000 price of the car this time, but 42,000, which is the net VAT, but you're going to claim the entire VAT back. So you're going to end up claiming in total, as I said, 17,000, let's say in the previous scenario, minus about 2,000, 15,000, plus 8,500 for VAT. That is about 24,500 in total. Against £50,000 car, you have just claimed back half the price of the car back. This is absolutely brilliant. Now let's try to understand what happens when you actually buy an electric car as a sole proprietor or a self-employed individual not operating under a company structure. The effect is almost roughly the same, but just to explain the numbers here, let's assume that you have an income of 100,000 and expenses of 20,000 again. So you make a net income of 80,000. Now, there is no corporate structure, which means that you're going to end up paying a normal income tax and a normal national insurance, which in this case will roughly equate to 90,400 in income tax and then another 4,100 in national insurance, giving you total deductions of 23,500. This is a scenario where you're actually self-employed but not registered for VAT. Now, if you purchased a car again, the electric car worth 50,000, what's going to happen is that your net income will reduce from 80,000 to 30,000 again. And your total tax liability will be 3,400 for tax and 1,500 for national insurance, giving you total deductions of 4,900. So in comparison to 23,500, you have just saved yourself another 18,500 in taxes, which means that the car is now 18,500 pounds cheaper. Now, in case you're registered for VAT, of course, what's going to happen is that 100,000 minus 20,000, the scenario where you're effectively not buying a car remains the same, which means you'll still end up paying 19,400 in taxes and 4,100 in national insurance, 23,500. But if you purchase the car, because the car of 50,000 is already inclusive of the VAT amount, now you can only deduct the net amount, which roughly equates to 41,500, because the 50,000 is made up of 41,500 roughly of the car price plus another 8,500 of VAT. VAT is charged at 20%. So then in this case, you will deduct 41,000 from your net expenses, i.e. 100,000 of income, 20,000 of expenses before, and now 41,000 of the car price, which is completely deductible in the first year, giving you a net profit of 38,000. In this case, what's going to end up happening is you will pay £5,000 in taxes, income tax, and another £2,500 roughly in national insurance, giving you total deductions of 7,500 in comparison to 23,500 that you paid before had you not bought the car. That means you've now received a tax credit of 16,000 roughly, but you can also claim the VAT back of 8,500 roughly, giving you a total credit of 24,500, which is absolutely amazing. Now, I know there are a lot of numbers here and it might be confusing. So if there's something that you don't understand, please leave a comment in the description and I will come back to you and respond to your questions. And hope you enjoyed the video. For more content like this, stay tuned. Do download the calculator and play around with it because I'm sure it will help you understand the different scenarios. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.